If you close your eyes, you can probably still smell it. That distinct mix of cigarette smoke, floor wax, and something savory simmering on a stove that had seen better days. The 1970s weren't just about disco and bell-bottoms. For a lot of us, they were about survival. We had the oil crisis, stagflation, and grocery prices that seemed to jump every time Mom went to the store. But you know what? We didn't starve. Our parents were magicians. They could take a single pound of ground beef, a few dented cans from the pantry, and feed a family of 6 without breaking a sweat. Today, we aren't just listing food. We're going back to the table. We're revisiting the 25 meals that got us through the hard times, dishes that might have been born out of poverty, but are rich in memories. Let's see how many of these you remember. Sloppy Joes. You can't talk about the 70s without the messy king of the dinner table. Before fast food was a weekly habit, this was a treat. Now, sure, Manwich had been on shelves since '69, and that was a lifesaver for working moms. But if money was really tight, you didn't buy the sauce, you made it. It was ground beef, back when it was maybe 79 cents a pound, drowning in ketchup, mustard, brown sugar, and Worcestershire sauce. The real secret wasn't the meat, it was the filler. Mothers were experts at hiding diced onions, celery, and peppers in that red sauce to bulk it up. It didn't matter if the bun disintegrated in your hands. That was half the fun. It was sweet, tangy, and cheap. Tuna Noodle Casserole. If Sloppy Joes were the treat, this was the backbone of the American weeknight. This dish is practically the mascot of 1970 struggles. It was the ultimate shelf-stable meal. A can of Campbell's cream of mushroom, a bag of egg noodles, and 2 tins of tuna, packed in oil, never water, because we needed those calories. But the texture is what you remember, isn't it? Soft noodles, creamy sauce, and then that crucial crunch on top. Maybe your mom used crushed potato chips. Or, if she was feeling fancy, those fried onions from a can. It sounded like gravel being crushed when you bit into it, but it tasted like home. It was a gray dish in a Technicolor world, but it filled you up for pennies. Beef stew. This was the Sunday solution for the meat nobody else wanted. You'd go to the butcher and ask for the toughest, cheapest chuck roast they had. You couldn't grill it. You couldn't fry it. You had to submit it. You put it in a heavy pot with carrots, potatoes, and onions, the root cellar trinity that lasted forever, and you let it go low and slow for hours. The house would fill up with this heavy, savory humidity. By the time dinner rolled around, that shoe leather meat fell apart if you looked at it wrong. We always ate it with white bread and butter to sop up the gravy. Nothing went to waste. Macaroni and cheese. We have to pay respect to the blue box. In 1974, you could pick this up for about 19 cents. It wasn't gourmet pasta with bechamel. It was survival rations that glowed in the dark. The powder wasn't quite cheese, and it wasn't quite plastic. It was just orange. But when you mixed it with margarine and a splash of milk, it became the most comforting thing on earth. If it was the night before payday, maybe you had it plain. If Mom had an extra $1, maybe she sliced up hot dogs into coins and threw them in. It took 7 minutes to make, and for a lot of latchkey kids, it was the first meal we learned to cook for ourselves. Chili mac. Speaking of stretching things, let's talk about chili mac. This is what happened when you had a little bit of chili left over, but not enough to feed the family. You didn't throw it out. You boiled a pot of elbows and married the two. This was genius because the pasta absorbed that chili powder and cumin flavor, swelling up to double the size of the meal. Suddenly, a cup of leftover meat fed 4 people. In the Midwest, they added corn. In the South, maybe a little extra tomato sauce. It was heavy, carb-loaded, and exactly what you needed after playing outside until the streetlights came on. Hot dogs and beans. Some people called them Beanie Weenies. We just called it dinner. This was a sweet relief from the bland food we usually ate. Van Camp's pork and beans were the standard. They had that specific, sugary tomato sauce that coated everything. You'd take a pack of hot dogs, the bright red ones that cost 60 cents, slice them up, and brown them in the skillet first. If you skipped the browning, they were rubbery. But if you got a little char on them before adding the beans, it added a smoky depth that tricked you into thinking you were eating barbecue. Served with a slice of white bread. It was protein and sugar, the fuel of 70s childhood. Cream chip beef on toast, S.O.S. If your dad served in the military, you ate this. They called it S.O.S in the mess hall, shit on a shingle. In polite company, we called it cream chip beef. It came in those little glass jars, dried slices of beef that were salted in the ocean. You rinsed them off, chopped them up, and made a white sauce with flour, milk, and plenty of pepper. You ladled it over toast that had to be toasted hard to stand up to the gravy. It's heavy, it's salty, and it sticks to your ribs like cement. You didn't wake up hungry after eating this. Goulash. Now, don't yell at me if you call this American chopped suey or slimgoyan. It has 100 names. But in the 70s, it was a universal empty-the-pantry meal. It wasn't the Hungarian paprika dish. It was macaroni, ground beef, and canned tomatoes. But the beauty was in the improvisation. Did you have a half can of corn? Throw it in. Green beans? Toss them. It was seasoned heavily with garlic powder and Italian seasoning to mask the fact that it was just leftovers. It tasted better the next day, after the pasta had soaked up all the red sauce. Cabbage rolls. This was labor-intensive, but cheap. Cabbage was, and still is, one of the most affordable vegetables on the planet. For pennies, you had a wrapper. The filling was the trick. You'd take a tiny amount of ground beef and mix it with a massive amount of rice. The rice absorbed the meat juices, so every bite tasted meaty even if it was mostly grain. You rolled them up, stacked them in a pot, and drowned them in tomato juice or sauce. They simmered for hours until the cabbage was translucent. It was peasant food from the old country that saved us in the new one. Gravy train with mashed potatoes. Now, this one might sound bleak to modern ears, but we loved it. We called it gravy train, or sometimes just potatoes and gravy. It usually happened on a Monday or Tuesday. Mom would take the dripping pan from Sunday's roast, that grease was liquid gold, and whip up a brown gravy. Then she'd make a mountain of mashed potatoes. Not the instant flakes, but real 10-pound bag potatoes because they were dirt cheap. And that was it. That was the meal. No meat chunks, just meat flavor. We'd build little volcanoes on our plates, fill the crater with gravy, and eat until we couldn't move. Potato soup. There's something elegant about how simple this is. Potatoes were the cheapest calorie per penny you could buy. You'd peel 5 pounds of them, boil them down, and mash half of them right into water to act as a thickener. You didn't need heavy cream. You just needed water, potatoes, salt, pepper, and maybe a little milk at the end. If you had an onion, you were living large. The flavor was mild and peppery. It warmed you from the inside out. We'd crumble saltines into it until it was basically a paste. It's funny. People pay $12 for rustic potato soup in restaurants now. Back then, it cost 12 cents a pot. Cornbread and beans. This is a meal that predates the 70s, but it saved us during the recession. A bag of dry pinto beans cost pennies. You soaked them overnight and boiled them all day with a ham hock or just some bacon grease. But the partner was essential, Jiffy cornbread. That little blue and white box cost 15 cents. You mixed it up, baked it in a cast iron skillet, and crumbled it right into the bowl of beans. The sweetness of the cornbread balanced the earthiness of the beans. It's a complete protein, chemically speaking, but we just knew it kept us full for hours. Fried Bologna Sandwiches. The poor man's steak. Oscar Mayer Bologna. Cold, it was slimy and sad. But introduce it to a hot cast iron skillet, and a miracle happened. You had to cut those 3 little slits in the side, the Pac-Man cuts, so it would lay flat. Otherwise, the center would bubble up like a red hat. The fat would render out, the edges would get crispy and black, and the smell was intoxicating. You'd slap that hot, greasy circle onto white bread with yellow mustard and a slice of American cheese that melted instantly from the heat. It was salty, fatty, and absolutely delicious. Peanut butter sandwiches. When the cupboard was truly bare, this was a fallback. But in the 70s, peanut butter wasn't just a lunchbox item. It was a dinner staple when the bank account hit zero. We aren't talking about artisan almond butter here. We're talking about massive tubs of generic peanut butter, or maybe Skippy, if there was a coupon. Sometimes you had jelly. Sometimes you just had corn syrup or honey. And if things were really tight, you had peanut butter on a spoon. It stuck to the roof of your mouth and kept your stomach from growling at night. It wasn't glamorous, but that jar saw a lot of families through the end of the month. Eggs and rice. This one traveled through neighborhoods. Maybe you picked it up from an immigrant neighbor, or maybe your dad learned it overseas. It was pure efficiency. A 20-pound bag of rice cost a couple of dollars. You'd steam a cup of rice and fry 2 eggs, runny yolk mandatory. You put the eggs on top, poke the yolk, and let that yellow gold coat the rice. A splash of soy sauce or just salt and butter, and you had a complete protein. It was breakfast for dinner, sure, but it felt different. It felt intentional. Rice pudding. We didn't throw away rice. That was a mortal sin. If there was white rice left over from Tuesday's stir-fry, it became Wednesday's dessert. Mom would mix the cold, hard rice with milk, sugar, an egg, and a handful of raisins. She'd bake it until skin formed on top, that golden, custodial skin that you either loved or hated. The smell of cinnamon baking would waft through the house, making you forget that you were eating leftovers. It was creamy, sweet, and comforting. Liver and onions. This is the divider. You either loved it or you sat at the table until 9 p.m. crying, because you couldn't leave until you finished it. Liver was 29 cents a pound. It was the cheapest protein available. The trick was the onions. You needed mountains of them, caramelized until they were sweet to cut the metallic, iron taste of the organ meat. If Mom overcooked the liver, it was like eating a boot heel. But if she got it right and smothered it in gravy, it was strictly survival for some and a delicacy for others. Tomato soup and grilled cheese. The dynamic duo. There is no comfort food combination more iconic than this. Campbell's tomato soup, made with milk, not water, for that creamy pink color, and a sandwich made of white bread and Kraft singles. The key was cooking the sandwich low and slow, so the cheese melted completely before the bread burned. The ritual of dipping the corner of the sandwich into the soup is a core memory for an entire generation. It was warm, salty, and soft. It cost less than $1 for 2 people, but it felt like a hug. Chicken and rice casserole. Chicken breasts were expensive. Chicken thighs and drumsticks, those were cheap. This casserole was a magic trick that made everyone happy. You put raw rice in a baking dish, mix a can of cream of mushroom soup with water, pour it over, and set the chicken pieces on top. Bake it for an hour. The rice steamed in the soup and chicken juices, absorbing every ounce of flavor. The chicken skin got crispy on top. It was a set-it-and-forget-it meal before that phrase even existed. Baked potatoes with toppings. The baked potato bar was a 1970s answer to everyone wants something different. Potatoes were huge and cheap. You scrubbed them, pricked them with a fork, and threw them in the oven for an hour. The meal wasn't potato. It was a scavenging hunt for toppings. Leftover chili? Put it on. Broccoli and cheese whiz? Put it on. Cottage cheese? Weird, but yes, put it on. It turned a side dish into the main event. And eating the skin was mandatory. That's where the vitamins were, or so we were told. Lentil soup. Lentils were the unsung hero of the legume family because, unlike beans, you didn't have to soak them. You could decide at 4 p.m. that you were having lentil soup and have it ready by 5:30. They turn into this thick, muddy sludge that looks terrible but tastes hearty. Moms would throw in carrots and onions, and the lentils would dissolve into a thick broth that didn't need flour or cream. It was earthy and filling. One pot lasted for 3 days, and honestly, it was always better on the second day. Spam and eggs. That sound, the SHHH clunk of the key turning the metal strip on the can. Spam gets a bad rap, but in the 70s, it was a miracle meat. It didn't spoil. You'd slice it thin and fry it until it was crispy like bacon. It was salty, porky, and fatty, served next to scrambled eggs and maybe some toast. It was a diner breakfast at home. Some dads even preferred it to real ham. It was a taste of camping and a taste of hard times, rolled into one rectangular block. Tuna salad on bread. This was the lunchbox king, but pulled double duty as a light dinner in the summer. 2 cans of tuna could feed a family if you use enough mayonnaise and relish. We chopped up celery for crunch, maybe hard-boiled an egg to stretch the protein, and mix it all up. You serve it on white bread, maybe with a leaf of iceberg lettuce if you were feeling fancy. It was cool, creamy, and required zero cooking, which, in a house without air conditioning in July, was a blessing. Pasta with butter and Parmesan. When the tomato sauce ran out, we stripped it back to basics. Spaghetti boiled slightly past al dente. A big knob of margarine, because butter was expensive, and the green can. You know the can. Kraft Parmesan cheese. It didn't need refrigeration, which was suspicious but convenient. You'd shake that salty, powdery snow over the hot, buttery noodles. We usually added a shake of garlic salt, too. It was white-on-white food, but it was oddly satisfying. It felt a little bit Italian, even if it was 100% American process. Cottage pie. Real shepherd's pie uses lamb. But who could afford lamb in 1975? So we made cottage pie with ground beef. You brown the beef with onions, mix in peas and carrots, usually frozen or canned, and made a quick gravy. Then came the blanket, a thick layer of leftover mashed potatoes spread across the top. You'd use a fork to make those little ridges, so they'd brown in the oven. When you pulled it out, bubbling and golden, it looked like a feast. It was mostly potatoes and gravy with a hint of meat, but it was warm, filling, and made with love. Looking back at these 25 meals, it's easy to focus on the ingredients we didn't have. But think about what we did have. We had families that sat down together every night. We had parents who could turn nothing into something. We had food that was hot, filling, and made by hand. These meals weren't just about surviving the economy. They were about caring for each other when the world felt uncertain. Which of these dishes brings back the strongest memory for you? Did you love the liver and onions, or did you feed it to the dog? Tell me your story in the comments below. I read every single one. And if this trip down memory lane made you smile, hit that subscribe button. We've got a lot more history to uncover. See you at the next meal.